Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. My wife Emmy and I never expected to become the center of a property rights battle that would shake our entire community. But sometimes life throws you curveballs, and this particular curveball involved 80 condos illegally built on our land and a homeowners association that thought they could steamroll over us. Here's how we fought back and won. Emmy inherited a beautiful 15-acre plot of land from her grandparents about 10 years ago. It had been in her family for generations. Her grandfather had purchased it in the 1940s when the area was nothing but farmland. The property sat on the outskirts of what has now become a rapidly growing suburban area. Part of it was wooded with old oak trees that Emmy had climbed as a child, and there was even a small creek running through it that fed into the nearby lake. We had always planned to build our dream home there someday. Emmy especially had a deep emotional attachment to the place. Her grandfather had taught her to fish in that creek. There was even a small clearing where her grandmother had maintained a garden, and Emmy could still point out where different flowers used to grow. We lived about an hour away and would visit the property every few weeks to check on things, clear brush, and make sure the boundary markers were still visible. "This will be our retirement haven," Emmy would say as we walked the perimeter. As a land surveyor by profession, she was meticulous about maintaining clear boundary lines. We had all the original survey documents, modern updated surveys, property deeds, and tax records stored safely. The property was completely paid off and legally rock solid in our names. The trouble started brewing a few years back. A housing development called Lakeside Estates had popped up adjacent to our property about 5 years ago. Like many new suburban developments, it came with an HOA, complete with ridiculous rules about paint colors, mailbox designs, and how often you needed to mow your lawn. We'd had a few minor run-ins with the HOA president, a man I'll call Mr. President. About 3 years ago, he approached us during one of our visits to the property. "You know, that strip of land along the roadway is community access," he informed us with the confidence of someone used to not being questioned. Emmy had pulled out her survey documents right there. "Actually, sir, our property line extends all the way to this marker here, which is 7 feet from the road's edge." Mr. President had looked annoyed. "Well, we'll have to look into that. Our community plans show differently." "Your community plans don't override legal property boundaries," Emmy had replied firmly. That should have been the end of it, but looking back, I realize it was just the beginning. Last year, Emmy and I had an amazing opportunity. We were both offered a 3-month consulting job overseas that would pay enough to jumpstart our dream home building fund. Since we were both able to work remotely, we jumped at the chance. We left in early March, planning to return in June when the weather would be perfect for finally breaking ground on our house. We had no idea what we would find when we got back. The day after we returned home, we drove out to the property, excited to start planning the house construction in earnest. As we came around the bend in the road that would reveal our property, Emmy gasped. "What the hell?" I slammed on the brakes. Where there had once been a serene wooded area with a babbling creek, there was now a massive construction site. Heavy machinery was everywhere. The trees, many of them over 100 years old, had been cleared. The creek had been partially filled in and redirected through a concrete culvert. And rising from the torn earth were the wooden frames of what looked to be dozens of multi-story buildings. Emmy was out of the car before I even fully stopped, running toward the nearest construction worker. "What is going on here? This is private property!" she shouted, her face flushed with shock and anger. The worker looked confused. "Lady, this is the Lakeside Estates expansion, phase 2 of the development." "No, this is our property. Who authorized this construction?" I demanded as I caught up to my wife. "You'll have to talk to management." "I just work here," the man said, pointing toward a construction trailer set up near what used to be the most beautiful stand of oak trees on the property. Emmy was in shock, her hands trembling as she looked around at the devastation. "The trees! My grandfather's trees! The creek!" Her voice broke. We marched over to the trailer and found the site manager, who called the HOA president. 20 minutes later, Mr. President pulled up in a shiny black SUV, looking irritated that his day had been interrupted. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, not even bothering to get out of his vehicle, just rolling down the window. "The problem? The problem?" Emmy's voice rose. "You're building on our property. This land belongs to us." Mr. President sighed as if dealing with troublesome children. "I think you're confused about the property lines. This land was purchased legally by the Association for the Phase 2 expansion. We have all the paperwork and permits." "That's impossible," I said. "This land has been in my wife's family for generations. We have the deeds and surveys." "Well, we have a deed too," he smirked, pulling out a folder from his passenger seat and handing over some official-looking documents. Maybe you should have paid more attention to your property. This is progress, and progress can't be stopped. I skimmed the documents, my blood running cold. According to these papers, the land had been sold to the Lakeside Estates HOA 3 months ago, right after we'd left for our overseas assignment. The seller was listed as someone claiming to be Emmy's cousin. "This is fraud," Emmy said, her surveyor's eye catching inconsistencies in the property description. "I don't even have a cousin named David. This is completely fabricated." Mr. President's smug expression didn't change. "That's not my problem. We purchased the land legally, obtained all necessary permits, and construction is well underway. We've already invested over $12 million in this project. If you have an issue, take it up with your cousin." "We'll be contacting our lawyer," I informed him. "You do that," he replied, rolling up his window. "In the meantime, you're trespassing on HOA property. I suggest you leave before I call security." The audacity of being told we were trespassing on our own land was too much. Emmy looked like she might either cry or punch through the man's windshield. I gently guided her back to our car. "We'll fix this," I promised her. "This is such obvious fraud they can't possibly get away with it." I was naive. The next day we met with our lawyer, who confirmed that our ownership was indeed rock solid and the sale was clearly fraudulent. He immediately sent cease and desist letters to the HOA, the construction company, and the local building department. Nothing happened. Construction continued. Our lawyer filed for an emergency hearing with the county court, which was scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, Emmy took a leave of absence from work to investigate how this could have happened. She discovered something shocking. Someone had created fake identification using her name and had sold the property to the HOA. The HOA had conducted only the most cursory verification of the seller's identity, just enough to satisfy the minimal legal requirements, but not enough to detect a moderately sophisticated fraud. Even more disturbing was what she found at the building department. When she asked how permits could have been issued without thorough verification of the property ownership, a sympathetic clerk who asked to remain anonymous told her, "Everyone knows the HOA president golfs with the county commissioner. When those applications come through, we're told not to look too closely." I attended the next HOA meeting, hoping to address the community directly and explain the situation. Maybe if the homeowners understood what their leadership had done, they would pressure the board to make things right. I was wrong again. "We'll now take questions from residents of Lakeside Estates," Mr. President announced at the meeting. I raised my hand and stood. "I'm not a resident, but I need to address this group about the Phase 2 construction." "I'm sorry, only residents can speak at these meetings," Mr. President cut me off. "It's in the bylaws." "But you're building on stolen property," I protested. 2 security guards approached me. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave." Several residents looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up as I was escorted out. Things escalated quickly from there. Our emergency hearing resulted in a temporary construction halt while ownership was investigated. The HOA response was to launch a smear campaign against us. Signs appeared in Lakeside Estates: "Don't let outsiders stop our community growth." A community newsletter portrayed us as greedy landowners trying to extort money from the HOA by making false claims. Some residents began giving us dirty looks when we drove past to check on our property. Meanwhile, Emmy assembled a mountain of evidence proving our ownership. Original surveys dating back to her grandfather's purchase. Tax records showing we'd paid property taxes continuously for decades. Historical aerial photos showing the property boundaries. Her professional surveyor colleagues provided affidavits confirming the accuracy of our surveys. The investigation revealed that the HOA had spent over $15 million on the project already. 80 luxury condos were in various stages of construction, with some nearly complete. Pre-sales had already begun, with deposits collected from hopeful buyers. Instead of acknowledging their mistake, the HOA doubled down. Their lawyer approached ours with a settlement offer. They would pay us $300,000 for the land, about 1/10 of its actual value even before they started building on it. "They're not taking this seriously," our lawyer told us. "They think you'll cave because you don't have the resources to fight them." They didn't know Emmy very well. "My grandfather didn't leave this land for some developer to steal," she said firmly. "We're going to fight this all the way." We hired a prestigious law firm that specialized in property rights with a team of 5 attorneys. They filed a comprehensive lawsuit naming not just the HOA as an entity, but each board member individually. The suit claimed trespassing, property damage, emotional distress, fraudulent misrepresentation, and asked for punitive damages. We also named the construction company and the officials who had approved the permits without proper verification. That got their attention. The construction company, realizing they'd been caught in the middle, immediately ceased all work and filed their own claim against the HOA for misrepresentation. Several HOA board members, suddenly facing personal liability, began distancing themselves from the decisions, claiming they just followed Mr. President's lead. I decided to play a little game of my own. I approached several Lakeside Estates residents who seemed sympathetic and expressed understanding for their position. "I get it. You've invested in this community and want to see it grow," I told one neighbor. "We're not against development in principle, we just want fair compensation and recognition of our rights." This more conciliatory approach got people talking to me, and talking people reveal things. One evening, I was invited to an unofficial neighborhood gathering. After a few drinks, a board member who was starting to worry about his own liability confided, "Between us, there were red flags from the beginning. The price was way too good, and the sale happened so fast. The president told us not to ask too many questions because it was a time-sensitive opportunity." Another resident who worked at the county records office admitted, "The paperwork looked rushed. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but he said the commissioner wanted it approved quickly." The most damning evidence came when a sympathetic resident who cleaned the HOA clubhouse secretly took photos of documents accidentally left out on the boardroom table, meeting minutes showing the board had been eyeing our property for years, and had even discussed how difficult it would be to get us to sell. One notation in Mr. President's handwriting read, "Property owners leaving country for 3 months. Perfect timing." This suggested not just negligence in verifying the fraudulent sale, but potential active participation in the fraud itself. When our case finally went to court 6 months later, we had accumulated overwhelming evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years on the bench, was clearly appalled by the HOA actions. The courtroom confrontation with Mr. President was particularly satisfying. "So you conducted the absolute minimum due diligence required by law when purchasing a multi-million-dollar property?" our lawyer asked him. "We followed all legal requirements," he insisted. "Did you find it at all suspicious that a property worth at least $3 million was being offered for $800,000? We considered it a motivated seller situation. And you didn't think to question why this motivated seller insisted on an unusually quick closing with all cash? That's not unusual in today's market." Our lawyer then presented the clubhouse documents mentioning our overseas trip, dated before the fraudulent sale. "Can you explain how you knew the property owners would be out of the country before this cousin approached you with the sale offer?" Mr. President's face went pale. "I don't recall that specific information," the judge interrupted. "I think I've seen enough. This court will reconvene tomorrow for my ruling." The next day, the courtroom was packed. Residents from Lakeside Estates, local reporters, and even a few developers curious about the outcome filled the seats. The judge didn't mince words. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant disregard for property rights and due diligence combined with what appears to be knowing participation in fraud," she began. "The evidence clearly establishes that the property in question has been continuously owned by the plaintiff's family for generations and was never legally sold to the defendant HOA." She looked directly at the HOA board members. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. The defendants are ordered to pay fair market value for the land as it exists now with improvements, which the court-appointed assessor has valued at $12.8 million. Additionally, the defendants will pay $3 million in damages for emotional distress, environmental damage to the creek ecosystem, and destruction of heritage trees." There were gasps from the HOA side of the courtroom. "Furthermore, all current board members are ordered to resign their positions immediately, and a forensic audit of HOA finances will be conducted. The county prosecutor has indicated that criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of office will be pursued separately against certain individuals." She turned to us. "As for the structures currently on the property, the plaintiffs have 2 options. They may require the defendants to demolish all structures and return the land to its natural state at the defendant's expense, or they may take ownership of the structures as additional compensation." Emmy and I had already discussed this possibility. We stood, and Emmy addressed the court. "Your Honor, we choose to take ownership of the structures." The judge nodded. "So ordered. This court is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, Mr. President tried to approach us, his previous arrogance replaced by desperation. "You can't do this. Those people have already put deposits down on those condos. You'll be ruining innocent families' dreams." Our lawyer stepped between us. "Your board's actions created this situation, not my clients. I suggest you focus on your upcoming criminal trial instead of harassing the people you victimized." In the aftermath of the ruling, several things happened quickly. The criminal investigation resulted in charges against Mr. President and 2 other board members. The construction company sued the HOA for misrepresentation, and the pre-sale buyers filed their own class action against the HOA for taking deposits on property the HOA didn't actually own. Meanwhile, Emmy and I had to decide what to do with 80 nearly completed luxury condos. We established our own property management company and finished the construction. We implemented policies that were the opposite of the strict HOA rules, reasonable maintenance standards, no restrictions on paint colors or decorations, and fair monthly fees that actually went toward maintaining the property rather than paying for board member perks. When the condos were completed, we reached out to all the buyers who had put deposits down with the HOA, offering them the opportunity to purchase directly from us at the originally promised prices. Most accepted, grateful that their investments weren't lost. With the settlement money, we hired environmental specialists to restore the damaged sections of the creek and replanted native trees in the undeveloped portion of the property. And yes, we finally built our dream home, a beautiful timber frame house overlooking the restored creek, on the 5 acres of the property we kept for ourselves. The sweet final touch came about a year later, after being acquitted on a technicality, though still financially ruined by civil judgments. Mr. President had the audacity to apply to purchase one of our condos, apparently not realizing who now owned them. Emmy personally called to reject his application. "I'm sorry," she told him, "but we have a strict policy against accepting residents who have participated in property fraud. It's for the safety of our community. I'm sure you understand. It's just progress, and progress can't be stopped." Sometimes justice takes time. But as my grandfather always said, patience and following the law properly will win in the end. We lost some beautiful old trees and a lot of sleep. But we taught that HOA a lesson they'll never forget. You can't just take what doesn't belong to you, no matter how important you think you are. As for Lakeside Estates, they have a new board now, elected by residents who learned a hard lesson about oversight and due diligence. Their property values took a hit after the scandal, but they're slowly recovering. Several residents have even purchased units in our development, preferring our more reasonable management style. Sometimes I walk along the restored creek with Emmy, watching the new saplings grow where her grandfather's trees once stood. They won't reach their full height in our lifetime, but someday they will. And that, I think, is the perfect metaphor for justice. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Background. To give you some background on my friend Tim, made-up name, he has been programming since he was like 7 years old. Tim said by the time he got to college, he breezed through most of his comp sci classes because a lot of the content they were covering he had already mastered years prior. Tim is an excellent programmer. Tim's career has been quite successful. He's worked for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and finally a hedge fund. The story starts at the hedge fund. Tim works a lot with AI technology, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer manager who spearheaded an effort to optimize their AI that helped them complete literally millions of trades a day. To say his work had a massive impact was an understatement. All of this is going on with COVID-19 in the background. Due to COVID-19, they went to a work-from-home model, where my friend Tim kept working. During the work from home, Tim was looking around his fancy $4,500 NYC apartment and wished for things like a yard, a heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, and not living in a high-rise. It dawned on Tim that he could leave NYC. Tim moves to Michigan, so Tim moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where he bought himself a really nice home with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, a nice yard, and guess what the yard had in it? A mother-in-love suite, which was essentially a 2-bedroom, 1-bath second home on the property of his main home, which he turned into his man cave. It's actually pretty sick. Oh yeah, and his mortgage payment was far less than his $4.5K a month rent. Like half. Tim spent the rest of his COVID-19 work from home pounding out projects, etc. He never actually informed his employer on an official basis he moved. He just kept working. Then COVID-19 ended. COVID-19 is finally over. Back to the office. Or Tim boss, Larry calls him up and goes, "All right, Tim, on Monday we are starting work back at the office." And Tim goes, "Yeah, about that I moved to Michigan." Larry is shocked and goes, "You didn't even ask if you could do that?" And Tim basically said, "I didn't know I needed your permission to move," in a sarcastic as fuck way. Larry insists that Tim needs to move back to NYC or he won't have a place on the team. Tim says he's been doing the exact same work from home at a high level for the past year. He's willing to travel to NYC for a few meetings a year on his own dime, but he feels his quality of life is so much higher outside of NYC he has no desire to live in NYC. To which Larry said, if Tim doesn't have any desire to live in NYC, then he has no desire to keep Tim employed. Now, dear Reddit, what do you think a talented senior programmer with over a decade of experience who specializes in AI technology is going to say to a response like that? If you're thinking he quit, you'd be absolutely right, he quit. Maintaining complex code can be hard. Now, anyone that has done any programming knows that sometimes the best person to maintain the code is the person who wrote the code. There's logic, there's thought processes, there's so much that goes into programming that can be so individualistic it can be hard for someone to take over a code base they didn't write. John, CEO, enters the picture 6 weeks goes by when John calls Tim. John is the CEO of the hedge fund. John gets Tim to agree to consider coming back, so that's when John suggests they fly Tim to NYC and he sits down with John. Tim, however, flipped the switch and said, no, how about you fly out to Michigan and we discuss this? Tim said he said that because he wanted to establish if he was going to come back, it was going to be him, working from Michigan, and if he was going to talk his employment, it was going to be done in Michigan. John agreed, and 2 days later flew out to meet with Tim. Tim sits down and John says they really need him because he provided a lot of value to the organization and the programming team is struggling. John offers Tim the opportunity to come back with a 20% pay cut, since he won't be living in NYC, and John called that a cost of living adjustment. To which John said, no, I want a 15% raise above what I was earning. John sits back and responds, the reason we pay what we pay is because we ask you to live in NYC and we understand that's an expensive city to live in. To which Tim says, you pay what you pay and you pay it because I am worth it. If I wasn't worth what you pay, you wouldn't be paying me. Now my first condition is if you want me back, it'll be a 15% raise. John goes, and second? The second condition is, I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there. John sighs, you're asking for too much. To which Tim goes, you don't need to bring me back. If you don't want to, I'll be fine elsewhere. John goes, I'll talk to the partners. Tim says, my offer is good till Friday. John goes, what do you mean? Tim says, next Monday is when I'm going to start looking for work. This offer is good until Friday. It was Tuesday. John leaves. That Thursday, the phone rings. It's John. In conclusion, Tim, we are transferring Larry to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we are fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign? Tim said, of course, and Larry is really gone. John goes, yes, you will never need to interact with Larry ever again. That was at the start of this year. Tim hasn't been in NYC, hasn't heard from Larry, hasn't seen Larry on any communications, etc. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This wasn't my malicious compliance, but my friend who I work with. We'll call her Amy. Relevant information. We work at a large grocery store and Amy is a team lead. Team leads are often asked to go to different departments and help out. However, because our department is usually incredibly busy, it can't be left completely without a guide. Because of this, every day, my department has one of the regular employees designated as an acting team lead, ATL, for when the team leads need to leave or get busy. Our department manager, Taylor, has a bad habit of playing favorites with some of the employees she's friends with. This includes ignoring when they break the rules, giving them more flexibility with the schedule and time off, etc. She also tends to try to replace the scheduled ATL with one of her friends, often putting Mark in charge instead. Yesterday, Amy came into work and asked one of the employees, Sarah, to do something for her. Sarah said yes and started the task. After a few minutes, Mark came up to her and asked her to do something else. Sarah told him that she couldn't because she was already doing what Amy had asked her to do. He left, and she figured that was that. An hour or so later, both Amy and Sarah get pulled into Taylor's office to talk. Taylor told Sarah that she should have listened to Mark because he was the ATL. Amy pointed out that he was not the ATL on the schedule, and Taylor told her that she had told Mark he could be the ATL. Taylor doubled down and said that Sarah should have listened to him instead of finishing what Amy had asked her to do. Amy was understandably irritated by this, so she decided that since Mark was apparently in charge over her, she would leave him to it. She took Sarah with her and went to help the produce department, who had been requesting help instead of going back to our department. On a normal day, this may have been fine. However, it was a Saturday, and we are always insanely busy on the weekends. It took all of 30 minutes before the department had crazy high customer wait times and things were falling apart. I had just clocked out and was talking to Amy before I left when the following exchange happened. Taylor radioed Amy to ask her why there were such high wait times in the department. Without missing a beat, Amy answered to tell her, I don't know. I'm not back there, but Mark is. He should know. Suddenly, Mark wasn't in charge of the department, and Taylor told Amy that she needed her to get back there to run things. Amy told her that she'd be right back there, then promptly told me that she'd be finishing stocking the cart she had before she went back, which was not even halfway done. I laughed and went home. I can only imagine that the department was in chaos given how it usually is on the weekends, and it reflects very poorly on Taylor when we have high wait times. I guess the actual team lead should have been in charge after all. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.